if you don't invest in your strong players, right, you will end up at the same place. And so you need to understand that maybe you take a fraction of what you're doing now and say, you know what, I'm gonna see what Jumpstart is up to. You don't have to be crazy like me and set up your own fund. You don't have to go millions of dollars in. Seek out opportunities for co-investing, like I was talking about, for other organizations that are already working within that space, and put some of your philanthropy dollars towards that. It is philanthropy in a sense. It's just capitalist philanthropy.
Let's discover the Cleveland entrepreneurial ecosystem. We are telling the stories of its entrepreneurs and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Dr. Elad Granot, the Dean of John Carroll University's Boler College of Business and co-founder and managing partner of an early-stage venture capital fund. Elad is passionate about the role of higher education in the world of startups, and he actively promotes making higher education more technology and more entrepreneurially focused throughout the academic community and to his students. Outside of his direct and his breadth of work as a practitioner, both in venture capital and in startups, Elad serves on a variety of boards where he is an enthusiastic booster of Ohio's economic, technology, and innovation ecosystems. We cover a lot of ground in this conversation, spanning what Cleveland can learn from Startup Nation and Elad's time in Israel, the role of academia in fostering an entrepreneurial mindset, the tolerance for risk that we have here in Northeast Ohio, technology transfer out of academic institutions, and a whole lot more. So with that, please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Elad Granot. I have a sense of, your professional history and your bio, but I think it would be a lot more interesting to hear it from you, a little bit about your story, where your interest in entrepreneurship and venture capital, your path to Cleveland, how all these things converge, and, what kind of brought you to where you are today.
Wow. Not a complicated question to answer at all. So I'll try to make sense of it. My background, my parents are Israeli. I grew up in the States. I grew up in New York before going back to Israel to finish high school and serve in the Israeli military, pretty much like every other Israeli citizen. That's important for the context of the conversation because the Israeli military is the bedrock of innovation in what's become known as a startup nation. Yes. Startup nation hasn't always been that type of juggernaut that it is now. That started in the late 90s, early 2000s, with a lot of technology that always existed, but on the government and military side, but then that sought to go into the private market, into business. And at that time, Startup Nation, the ecosystem didn't exist. And so when a lot of innovation got pent up with no venture capital and no culture of entrepreneurship, sound familiar? We're going to get back to that.
It does. I know we are.
Yeah. And so when all of that sort of tried to find an outlet, the default was go to your service providers, your global service providers, your CPAs, your attorneys that work for global companies like KPMG, where I was, and see how they could help you. And so I was on the ground floor of helping all these companies try to raise funds, try to make BD on the international side. And I pretty much learned from the ground up what it's like to work with founders, with technology, and have done it since. We're in 2022, so it's beyond 30 years of me working alongside founders, and then eventually VCs, and then eventually my own VC, my own ventures, and so on. We'll get into that. Cleveland happened when in 2006, I was completing my doctorate at the University of Massachusetts with absolutely no intention of going into higher education, and got a call from the dean of the business school at Cleveland State saying, hey, why don't you come check us out? We heard you're getting your doctorate. We heard you're not a traditional academic, that you're really into applied business and all this stuff. We'd like for you to come and join us. I came. I was impressed by the man, by the dean. and the institution, and we moved to Cleveland in 2006, and I've been here ever since in a variety of capacities and institutions. We can talk about that, but that's sort of the semi-short answer to your question.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of threads to pull on here.
You loaded it up that way.
I know.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I think it sets the stage really well because I think we'll pull on all the threads. Perhaps like working our way towards Cleveland, and I know this is something we would have got to later, but going to Israel for a sec, actually, because I think we can just draw the parallel off the bat. Here we are in Cleveland, both working, respectively with entrepreneurs and in the space and trying to build companies and trying to build an ecosystem and create a community here. And I think we're making progress. Yeah. Certainly in my time here, it's gotten better. We have a lot that we can do to get even better. But, I think there's enough people here thinking about this and trying to figure out how do we get to a place that we want to be. I'm really curious, from the perspective of Startup Nation, from Tel Aviv, what did you learn from like coming from a place where it wasn't there to where it's now kind of one of the flagship, you've San Francisco and you have Tel Aviv in a lot of ways.
Sure. A lot. I learned a lot. And I tell you, a few years ago, we had an effort here, which I was proud to be a part of, to try and bring blockchain technology to Cleveland. It was branded as Blockland. Bernie Moreno led the charge and sort of grouped around him a lot of the leadership and other people that were involved and that sought to do something in Cleveland. That was the first time that I saw some of the parochial fiefdoms in Cleveland break down, and I think that's part of the issue here that has gotten better. As you say, I think that's part of what has gotten better. We can talk about that. And that was the first time that you sort of saw players from nonprofit, business, government, which is the key. And so Startup Nation's secret isn't that secret, and I'll break it down in a second. And so we did a lot of things. It didn't necessarily succeed, but that's not the point. The point is that as far as I'm concerned, in my time here, and I'm a transplant to Cleveland, in my time here, it's the first time that I've seen players come together to move something forward in unison. And what was interesting, there was one time that we were literally all of us around a huge table, the convention center, I think, or somewhere around it was the Bar Association, that conference room.
Yeah.
And so everybody was there. And everybody needed to say something. They felt like they had to take the microphone and say something. Fine. And after the 10th speaker or so, I remember getting really tired of it. By the time that Mike got to me, I said, hey guys, I appreciate everybody being here. And I think we're doing something important. But, I come from Startup Nation. And I can tell you one thing we've never done at Startup Nation, and that's have a meeting like this. We've never sat around a table and asked ourselves, so who's going to do what? And who's in charge of this? Where's the budget coming from? No, everybody's just doing. There was never, and still to this day, has never been a meeting, around some table somewhere in Tel Aviv where everybody's like, okay, you do this, you do that. No, everybody's just busy doing. And I think we're now a lot closer to that than we were before. The parallels between Tel Aviv and Cleveland are very, I think, clear. For the first part, if you just look at the most major similarity, it is that it's not a natural place for a innovation and ecosystem to thrive. The coasts are, we get it. But if you look at Tel Aviv, in a country that's surrounded by enemies, so no commerce with close by neighbors, is stuck in the middle of nowhere, the Middle East, we're in the Middle West, and has no natural resources, milk and honey notwithstanding, right? And so what do you do, right? What do you do? The difference between us and them is that they have to do in order to live. So that is, I think, by the way, I'm not wishing upon us some sort of death imperative, but when you have to innovate to sustain life, you become incredibly innovative, especially when there are no resources. And so that is the key. Now, the players are what makes it possible. The military, everybody goes through the military. So I said I went to the military, everybody does. The military invests huge amounts in innovation for its own purposes. But, and here's the big, the big differentiator. Whatever Israeli citizens produce for the military apparatus, they get to own the IP by the time they're done with their service, minus the confidential parts. Imagine that. Imagine a state, right? Imagine Ohio investing in young entrepreneurs so they could do whatever they're doing. And if they succeed, they owe the state nothing. If they fail, they owe the state nothing. If they succeed, they pay back whatever the investment was, and that's it. And then the state thrives because these founders are staying here, paying taxes, hiring people, all that stuff. We're a long way to go from that.
But at one point, was it purely from, a motivation of survival? Like, is it requisite that, that is the case? Like, could we, through just sheer will and, desire and innovation,
absolutely,
foster that kind of?
Yeah, we don't have to be on death's door to realize that innovation is the future for us. And I think we've already made that we've all recognized it. If you look at the healthcare industry here, and if you look at technology around us, with manufacturing really transitioning into a technology business. We've understood that we're not under threat of death, but we understand that financially, economically, competitively, as a state among all the states in the union, we have to compete. We don't have, the sexiness, so to speak, of the West Coast. We don't have the capital of the East Coast.
Yep.
But we still have to compete. And so, what do we have? We have our work ethic, we have our healthcare industry, we have our manufacturing, we have our history, we have what I think is incredibly important, a mixture of immigration, which is really unique, so unique that most of us don't realize it because we take it for granted. But it's incredibly powerful. Not every state has that. And look to the north, we have an insane amount of water. And so when you put all that together, other states would kill for that. And we put stuff on the lakefront. That's for another conversation, maybe. But we have all of these resources.
Okay, very interesting. So I want to maybe tie in academia, right,
Sure.
and the role that plays, because I think if you look to maybe some of our peers out, Pittsburgh, even San Francisco and New York, I think entrepreneurs tend to be drawn to other entrepreneurs, just geographically speaking. And I think if you just survey, probably in Startup Nation as well, out in Israel, like the university is a non-negotiable part of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So just kind of high level, your perspective on the role of academia as it relates to entrepreneurship, maybe tying in your personal experience,
Sure.
what drew you to John Carroll and the nature of, what is that? What are you responsible for there?
Higher education in the Israeli ecosystem is an integral part, just as important as the military is. The institutions of higher education are geared towards producing innovation. In fact, for a small country, quarter the size of Ohio, it has 4 of its universities ranked in the top 50 in the world. And so that shows that there's significant, huge investment in higher education. And it also shows that higher education is geared towards producing innovation.
Yep.
And so that's critical. We have to do that. We have some amazing universities here. And so obviously Intel came here because of that university south of here, I forget their name. There are other phenomenal research institutions around here, but there are also schools like John Carroll that are not what's known in our industry as R1 institutions, right? But if you look at the marketplace, and if you look at Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, and you look at all the folks that we're talking about that are entrepreneurs, innovators, many of them are John Carroll grads.
Yeah.
This is not a coincidence. And so how does this happen? How do you have this pipeline of innovation and entrepreneurship from a university that doesn't produce, at least not as a goal, innovation and entrepreneurship? One of the things that drew me to John Carroll was this gap, and me telling them, look, every university that I know of in thriving ecosystems, the top 10 global ecosystems, in all of them, universities play a significant role. By the way, the U.S. slipped to number 11. We have to do something about that. And so, we have to get into the innovation business. And so as a business school dean, the way for me to do it is I have an entrepreneurship program. I have one of the best programs in the nation. Our entrepreneurship program at John Carroll is really well known. But I identified a gap, right? And the gap is it's not producing too many entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And in a microcosm of what's happening in the Midwest and in Northeast Ohio in general, it's because there's no capital. Right, so you have kids, freshmen, sophomores, and others come up with ideas. They come to our Center for Entrepreneurship. They get a little bit of mentorship and guidance and strategic planning and all the other stuff. But at the end of the day, they don't have capital to move forward. And as we know, the number one reason startups fail is they run out of cash.
Right. They run out of money.
It's that simple. And so what we're doing now is we are shamelessly copying the Israeli model. And that is we're putting in a venture capital fund into the business school that will be run by students. So it solves two issues. It solves the capital issue for entrepreneurs, but it also solves the talent issue in venture capital around here, right? There's not enough, everybody keeps saying that. Yeah. There's not enough venture capital and there's not enough venture capitalists here. And so I'm trying to address that both by having my own venture capital fund run out of Boler, investing in entrepreneurs, student entrepreneurs in the university, and having my own ecosystem within the university, but also producing it. That's, I think, our job, producing it into the ecosystem.
One of the interesting things for me, just reflecting on my own experience, what brought me to Cleveland, a lot of the folks we've had on the show tend to be a little bit more tenured, experienced, older entrepreneurs. I think there's this real challenge for entrepreneurship coming out of college. You have, the large firms, investment banking, consulting, who, will spend millions of dollars recruiting and provide a really good, stable, professional path for anyone coming out of college. Mm-hmm. That's in line with the kind of ambitious, mindset that a lot of these kids will have. How do you foster the entrepreneurial mindset? Because it's not a risk, averse path.
Oh no, it seeks risk by its very nature. No, you're absolutely
it's hard,
right.
And most of them are going to fail, and
sure,
the stability, perhaps like the perceived risk of people. It's a grind.
Yeah, I think you hit on something by talking about failure. I'll get to that in a second, but I think there's a misconception about when people hear the word entrepreneurship, they immediately go to starting your own business. And entrepreneurship is not just that. Entrepreneurship is a mindset, and you can be entrepreneurial within someone else's business. I mean, we're seeing huge companies outsource their entrepreneurial spirit because they've come under this formula that you're describing of security, risk-free, avoiding mistakes, avoiding failures, right? And so they've come to the point where they can't innovate. And all of a sudden now they're hiring innovative and entrepreneurship think tanks to sort of jumpstart their entrepreneurship. So I think there's a lot to be said for entrepreneurship. Having working within an organization, a healthcare organization, a manufacturing organization, a bank. Got to be careful how creative you want to be, but on the other hand, if you think about fintech, right? Yeah. A lot of fintech is eventually directed at large financial institutions that haven't innovated themselves.
Yep.
Right, and so entrepreneurship by definition isn't just starting your own business. It's about being entrepreneurial within a setting. It could be your own business, but it could be someone else's. It could be a 5,000 person company, and you are innovating within that system. So that's important for me to say. If you realize that, then as a business school, and I don't know how common it is for business school deans to be from the mold that I come from. What I mean by that is I'm a practitioner. I'm a business guy,
right,
who's a business school dean. It's still amazing to me that people are surprised by that.
Well, it's one of the common critiques, I think, often of academia is they're not practitioners.
Right. And so imagine, I always equate it to med school, right? Imagine if a med school dean was a theoretical surgeon, right? Never really just read books about it and watched YouTube videos or whatever, and is really the world's biggest expert on surgery, just never really conducted surgery. That's how ridiculous that is to me in a business school, right? And so I shouldn't be the exception. I hope there's more and more business deans, business faculty who are practicing practitioners who are also passionate about educating, which is what got me into higher ed. And that goes to entrepreneurship, right? If you come from entrepreneurship, and that's something that I'm very proud of building at Boler. And that is, I'm bringing in entrepreneurs in residence, people who have nothing to do with academia, into the academic setting, because students need to see the end product. You're right to say that, if you're an accounting student, you sort of expect the Big Four to come. You'll interview by your junior year, you'll have a job, everything's great, right? That's great. But it's not for everyone, and we're not really pushing the envelope. We're not innovating. We're not creating opportunities for others. If we accept risk and if we embrace failure, and I think that's a very big if, right? It's really difficult. The American mindset isn't forgiving of mistakes. And we need to get over that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one, going back to your question before about the Israeli mentality, Israelis have no problem admitting to mistakes. They make them all the time, but then they analyze the crap out of it, right? What did we do wrong? How can we make sure not to do it again? Let's share it with everyone else so at least we don't make that mistake again. And in fact, just as an aside, in our own, I have a venture capital fund that I funded and manage. When we look at our prospective founders, we like the ones that have multiple failures in their resume. That tells a lot. And so if we can get over that hump of failing is embarrassing, we can get a lot more students interested in entrepreneurship as a mindset, not necessarily starting their own business, but sure, no problem if they want to. And that's why I'm offering it as a minor, because I'm hoping that even non-business students will come and get that as a minor. I think it's critically important. It opens up the mind, gives you ideas. So many people walk around with great ideas, and then they wake up one day, somebody else did it, and they go, shit. Can I say shit on a podcast? Whatever.
It's all good here.
Right? And so we teach them, entrepreneurship is much like leadership. You can't really teach someone who wasn't born with an aptitude to it to be really good at it, but you can teach the principles and point to people who do it very well, so people can draw conclusions for themselves and see what they can apply from what they've learned.
Yeah, in many ways, that's I think what I've been trying to do with this podcast is right. What are the things that other people have already figured out that they have mastered that you can draw, get inspiration from their own experiences.
Yeah,
I think the learning in practice and not in theory thing also resonates quite a lot. And I'm curious how you think about how to overcome this pervasive mentality that I think a lot of us have, that fear will be failure rather will be castigated. And in my own experience, I think I shared that, and then having gone through a failure, it really was kind of celebrated, which was like really a surprising.
Yeah,
it was not what I expected, walking away from a company that did not end up in a good outcome.
Yeah, I have a pet peeve about business textbooks. Forget the fact that they're books, and who the hell read? I mean, by the time they're printed, they're already outdated. Forget it. But the concept behind business textbooks always puzzles me, and that is they always bring up and mention and elaborate on best case scenarios. Right? That's great. What can you learn from best case scenarios? Nothing. Give me a book about mistakes, right? Give me a book about colossal failures, right? We thought we were doing well. Give me a book about FTX, right? What the hell happened, right? How did this go wrong? How come so many smart people did not see it coming?
Yeah.
If they did, why'd they choose to ignore it? That's how you learn, right? And so we need to bring failure into the foreground as a learning mechanism, as a tool for understanding what not to do again. Again, best case scenarios are wonderful. They're really amazing. Everything went swimmingly, and we got the money, and everything worked. Great. What did I learn from that? Nothing. Right. And so I think there's a shift that we need to make in our business culture. I think it's happening. And again, I take you back to something I mentioned before. There's an incredibly healthy dose of immigrants among founders in the United States.
Absolutely.
And immigrants have no problem with admitting mistakes, because all the shit they've gone through to be here. Making a mistake is nothing. And so I was just talking to somebody about how difficult it is, and I'm an immigrant myself. When you come to a different ecosystem and you're an immigrant, you have no network. Until you experience not having a network, you don't understand how significant that is, right? And so you cannot be this, you can't let hubris lead you and be this perfect person. You need to be vulnerable, smart, and accept guidance. And I think that sort of feeds into, I'm not saying seek failure. I'm not saying deliberately try to fail, but when you do fail, try to extract the benefits of that failure, because failure to me, and I'm sorry for the cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. Failure to me means you tried, and I'll take that any day.
Yeah. How in practice at John Carroll, for example, do you facilitate that and getting students to try?
Yeah, one of the best ways to do that, and this generation is interesting. By the way, being at a academic institution is really cool because you're with young, smart people all the time. The problem is I'm the only one getting old, right? They're all 18 to 22 all the time. So if you can get past that, you need to realize that there's an immense sense of insecurity at that age, and this particular generation is very different from mine. Not better, worse, just different. One of the things that I think is lacking or needs improvement, and certainly the pandemic didn't help, is social interactions and social skills.
Yeah.
And so, we were just talking about how fun it is to do this face to face, but many fear that. And then the pandemic sort of gave them reason not to do it. And I don't want to get on a pedestal about working from home because I think it's bullshit. But I think there's an issue here. And so the first thing we did is we brought them back to campus. We are back. We are an institution of higher education. We do things face to face. That's not to say we don't have all the Zooming and all the online stuff and all the other stuff. Great. But the bottom line is human interaction. Creativity flourishes when there's human interaction, and comfort with other people allows you to be more vulnerable in terms of failures. And so there's this cycle that you need to be very deliberate with, that institutions of higher education have the privilege of instilling. I can literally say, you're going to show up, right? And so you need to be honest about the reasons for that. And I believe we are. Our students' interests are our interests. What we're trying to do is prepare them for their life and their career by the time they leave.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And not to also borrow a cliche, but business is just people.
Yeah.
It's like the most valuable thing a company has. All of the interactions is just how you communicate with other people.
There's another thing that, another cliche that isn't true, and that is business is just business. It's not personal. I think that could not be further from the truth. Everything is personal.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about the no a-hole rule, which I subscribe to wholeheartedly. And so you do better with people that you get along with, and you get along with people if you actually see them. And so if there's one thing that I would commend Cleveland for being, and we talked about it before we started taping. I just dated myself. The one amazing thing about Cleveland, and there are many, is that we get together here. And so you and I hang out in the same circles, even though demographically we're not. We sort of move towards the same goal. We have this, the same attitude towards things. We don't have a stuffy attitude here in the Midwest. We work hard. We don't take ourselves too seriously, but we understand our value. It's a great place. It's a great launch pad, I believe, to be a very competitive region.
So on that theme of collaboration, one of the really cool things I think has, surveying a bunch of different entrepreneurs here is that a handful of them have come from Case, a handful of them have come from Cleveland State, a handful of them have come from John Carroll. Where's the opportunity for collaboration really just focused under this academic umbrella?
Yeah, I'm going to answer honestly.
Yeah,
and it's not necessarily going to be the most politically correct answer. I'll give you a different sector first, and then we can talk about it. Asking for collaboration among academic institutions is noble, but if you look at the bigger players in this market, right? If you look at Cleveland Clinic, UH, and Metro, show me how they're collaborating, and then I'll tell you how I'm collaborating with Cleveland State and with Case Western. This is a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
But this is we're competitors, and so at the end of the day, we are competing for students at our institutions. And there's a limit to what the kids called how much you can be frenemies with other players in the marketplace. Having said that, when you look at budgets, when you look at resources, when you look at research directions, collaboration is critical. And I think around regional economic development, that's where we can find more of a consensus than other things, right? And so. Do we see each other every once in a while? Sure, we do. I work with the folks at Case. I've spent a long time at Cleveland State. Know a lot of people there, but I'm a very competitive guy, And so if I can do something without those two, I will. That's just the honest truth. I believe my colleagues at the three health systems here have the same, which I consider to be healthy attitude. But I understand the how shall I say, the merits of the fantasy world where everybody collaborates.
Sure. Well, I think to paint the picture why I think it might matter is one of the things from the perspective of a healthy Cleveland entrepreneurship ecosystem, one of the critical ingredients is retention. And I feel, if you pull in the parallel of what, Israel, like everyone who's graduating, going through the military, they're going to stay there. Mm-hmm. There's not, I think, so much a fear of a retention problem in Israel. Whereas here, a lot of folks are looking maybe for a reason to stay, but it's not inherently there in the same way.
Yeah, I could see that point. Although, the pandemic did have some positive outcomes, and one of them was people coming back, right? And seeing the value of being here. And we see that a lot. I think you're absolutely right about retention. And again, I'm a capitalist. I believe that motivations are primarily driven by economics. And so what's missing here, I alluded to it before, is financial opportunity, right? If I'm a founder and I need to raise, it's not going to, all due respect to Jumpstart and all the other players who are phenomenal. I'm working with them and I think they're great. The odds are I'm going to have to go somewhere else. So the retention issue is people love this place. Great quality of life, great weather, 8 months out of the year.
Yep. Good portion of it.
But we love it here. All of us love it here. And so the issue is when we have the next step, and actually what we were saying about Israel is partially true because in Israel as well, once you hit a certain point, on a certain level, they do leave. They have to leave. And they have a lot more capital than we do, but they don't have the geography that we do. Yep. And so your point is well taken, but also there are similarities in that sense. Having said all that, I think if we had a thriving venture capital ecosystem here, we would see a lot less people migrate out of here. In fact, we could draw some here because we have areas that we're strong in on a national level, right? Yep. If we have, I worked very closely with UH Ventures. I think you spoke to David recently. And
yes.
We need more of that. We need more UHVs, and B, we need more Davids, right? We need more people who are pushing for developing a healthy, robust venture capital community.
Yeah, no, I think that does make a lot of sense. One detour, if you're in
go for it
for a sec, because this one, I really don't have a good sense of how it works. And again, just through kind of surveying a lot of folks trying to build companies, it seems to me that there is a lot of underrated, undervalued opportunity in technology transfer from academic institutions to spin out, to create, to just even like test the market with some of those ideas. It's come through from a lot of the folks who I think have come from academia and have tried to build something out of maybe their area of focus for research. How do you unlock the
There's two problems.
Tech transfer.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't just seem that way. It is that way. And so there's two problems.
Yeah.
One is higher ed is notorious in terms of holding on to IP. Yeah. And so faculty are discouraged from developing things while under the auspice of the institution because they would owe it to the institution and some sort of mob tactic that it doesn't make any sense to me. And so there's a disincentive to innovate if you're a part of an academic community because you are expected, contractually obligated to give a piece of it to the institution simply because you're there. That is so old school. Yeah. And so not forward looking that's part of the reason. The second is, again, sorry to harp on this, but that's just the issue. There's not enough funding going into that. And so, here's the cool thing about Startup Nation. The military and the academic institutions provide resources, training, investments, and at the end of the day, if you develop something for them, you get to keep the IP. And so minus the, top secret stuff,
sure,
laser secret, whatever. And so how amazing is that, right? For an institution to put all this energy and all this investment into you and then say, it's yours, go ahead. That is something that we haven't learned how to do here. Higher education in general is a aircraft carrier. It takes a long time to move things and turn things.
Yep.
Actually, it's slower. And so expecting it to be that way, you would need an incredibly forward-looking board of trustees and leadership to let go. And I think you would see such a flurry of activity that would actually be paying off on the other side a lot more than what you're seeing now. And that is, and look, Case has an amazing tech transfer pipeline. Cleveland State does as well. But we at John Carroll, we don't have a tech transfer office. And so, I'm trying to build now an internal venture capital fund. And the questions that I'm getting, which are valid, are, well, how are we going to handle the IP, and where are we going to get the money from, and who's going to do this, and who's going to do that? As you know, entrepreneurs don't bother with this type of questioning. And I keep telling everyone, I'm much more about speed than perfection. Higher ed isn't. And so there's a long way to go. And until somebody breaks the mold, it's gonna lavish. And so I'm a lowly business school dean. I'm not a president. I don't control entire institutions. But if I did, that would be what I would push for. It's like, guys, you know what? Let's just invest in our people and let them do whatever they want. And let's not tell them that we want to keep a piece of it ahead of time just because we gave them an office. They would be more loyal. They would be more successful. They would take more risks. And if everything goes great, we'll get our piece at the other end. That's the way we need to go. And on the coast, they do that, right? Stanford, that's their model, right? And so Stanford, people say, oh, well, it's Stanford. No. It's not because they're Stanford. It's because of how they do things.
Right.
That's why
they set the right incentives.
Yeah.
It's just been an idea kind of floating in my head. It feels like there's a lot of potential there.
You're right. Yeah, 100%.
Interesting. Cool. So I'd love to maybe pull it back to just more, your personal, experience and path, and maybe tell us a little bit about iAngels and the impetus for that and some of the work that you've done there.
Yeah. So iAngels is an amazing venture capital fund out of Tel Aviv. It was founded by two super bright founders. They happened to be women. That took on the identity of the fund. So most of the fund is run and managed by women. There are some guys like me who are allowed to be involved. I say that semi-jokingly. I think they're incredibly bright, all of them, and it's a huge pleasure to be working with them. I know one of the founders on a personal level for a long time. The other thing that's similar between Tel Aviv and Cleveland is the interpersonal connections and the 1 degree of separation as opposed to 6, right?
Yep.
And so you and I met literally because I reached out to you and we met. That was it. I didn't need anybody introducing us. That wasn't through, I didn't have to go through your secretary or whatever. No. It was pretty straightforward, right?
Yep.
And so that is something that you can't artificially build. And we have that here, and so does Tel Aviv. And so when Shelley, one of the founders of iAngels, reached out to me for advice, input, it was based on a personal relationship that our families have had for a long time.
Yeah.
And then I found an amazing fund that works in co-investing, which I love that model. Because again, I'm all for breaking barriers. And I think one of the things, when you look at accredited investors and you put up barriers, what you're getting is a filtered sample rather than a qualified sample. And so you're blocking, I'm all for access. And so co-investing by its very nature allows access, right? Because you can have fractional investments and all that type of stuff. And so the combination of knowing the founders that are so brilliant, loving the model of co-investing, and then looking at their portfolios, which, one of the most amazing things about Israeli technology is it's technology that we need. What I mean by that is there's a reason TikTok didn't come out of Tel Aviv. There's no security application for TikTok, right? But other stuff that's come out, whether it's the pill cam, 30 years ago, which still people are mentioning as an amazing innovation. Anything has to do with cybersecurity, anything has to do with drone technology, anything, the number one autonomous driving epicenter in the world is in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv doesn't make one car, not even a toy car.
Right.
And yet all of the car companies have their R&D centers there. Intel has a huge facility there. And so when you see the innovation that comes out, it is incredibly sophisticated, but it's all technology that we need. And so I'm not saying there's less risk in investing in that type of technology, but when you look at it, it's all, yeah, that makes sense. We need that.
Right.
And so when you put all that together and having the privilege of advising such an amazing fund, seeing it grow, seeing it expand, it's been a phenomenal experience. And it inspired my partners and I to set up our own fund and invest alongside them. Not an easy feat. And in the Midwest, all of my partners are Northeast Ohio, Cleveland people.
Yeah.
All of them are quite wealthy. If they're listening to this, they know I'm saying the truth. and all of them have never taken risks in their investments because that's not what you do in the Midwest.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, this Israeli guy comes over and says, hey, let's invest in really high risk technology stuff that's just out of this world. And it took a while for us to put the fund together. But the main thrust was when we went to Tel Aviv and they showed us their portfolio companies. And it was just one after the other, just phenomenal stuff. And we put the fund together.
That's very interesting. Because I was going to ask how you change the perception of risk that people have from, having the capital to invest, but being risk averse to having that same capital, but just, it's a shift in perspective, and maybe it just requires seeing what the good outcomes can be.
Yeah, and so it's not
because we have a lot of capital in Cleveland.
100%. We have insane amounts of capital, but we have zero tolerance for risk.
Yes.
And so my pitch was quite interesting. I've never raised money that way. My pitch was, look, you folks are all incredibly rich, and you give away to charity, and you do all these amazing things. Good for you. How about you take a chunk of that capital that you weren't going to invest in your medical office buildings or whatever stuff is as solid as it could get, and let's go on an adventure, right? Let's go with technology investing. I'm telling you right now, and that was the first time I ever pitched something that way, but I believed it. I said, I'm telling you right now, you're never going to see this money again. You're absolutely going to lose it all. It's incredibly high risk. If you're thinking about returns, don't invest. And it worked. And so now I got lucky because the pandemic has been good to us. We've had some really nice exits with some really healthy multiples, but that wasn't the plan, right? The plan was just to dip our toe in the water, see what VC is like, see what cutting edge technology looks like, work with brilliant people, and then maybe we'll make some money at the end. I know it's not a solid business plan, but that's how it started.
Yeah. That
was the only way I could figure out to get Midwestern folks to invest in high risk tech ventures.
What is your thesis perspective on how to replicate that? Do we need more of you to raise those kind of funds? How do we really get at the core of at scale solving the problem?
Yeah, I inadvertently, I think I stepped on what I thought or I still think worked. And that is, I drew a parallel between venture capital investing and philanthropy, and basically said, it's disposable income, so to speak,
right,
that you're putting towards causes that you think are important. Well, guess what? Regional economic development is important.
Yeah.
And so just because you might end up making money on the other side of it, great. But you need to start investing. You were talking about brain drain, right? You were talking about retaining all the bright people here. So there's a lot to be said for philanthropy. It's incredibly important to support marginalized groups and causes that no one else is funding.
And it's such a dominant,
of course it is,
part of Cleveland.
So having said that, if you don't invest in your strong players, right, you will end up at the same place. And so you need to understand that maybe you take a fraction of what you're doing now and say, you know what, I'm gonna see what Jumpstart is up to. You don't have to be crazy like me and set up your own fund. You don't have to go millions of dollars in. Seek out opportunities for co-investing, like I was talking about, for other organizations that are already working within that space, and put some of your philanthropy dollars towards that. It is philanthropy in a sense. It's just capitalist philanthropy. I just coined a new term. I think there's a switch that needs to be made. I think local government, city, county, state needs to lead by example.
Yeah.
And I think, there, like you say, there's so much capital here. I'm not saying just because you have it, you can throw it away. I'm saying invest it in the people, and the ventures might even work out as well.
Right. There's a chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really interesting. I feel like we could talk about this stuff for a long time. How do you think about, piecing together all these things, as a practitioner, helping educate? What does success look like for you? How do you think about, the impact, and in retrospect, what kind of impact you would like to have?
As a business school dean, success, first and foremost, is every single one of my graduates either getting a job or going to grad school or starting their own business. That's success. So 100% would be success. We're very close to that, by the way, but it's something you keep working at. So that's a measurable KPI, and I think it's critical. I also see success as moving the needle, right? And so you could tell by listening to what I've been saying today that I'm extremely passionate about building this entrepreneurial, innovative ecosystem, and understand the importance of capital to that, to fulfilling that dream, right? And so I'm doing everything I can to produce awareness to that. It isn't taken for granted, and then produce talent, and then try and build capital, both in terms of actual money, but also in terms of resources.
Yeah.
And really create a shift. I have to say that I'm incredibly optimistic about the change of the guard in some of the most important institutions around here, right? From Mayor Bibb to Dan Hampu at the Morgan Foundation, to leadership in our institution and others, to leadership at the health systems, to Beju at GCP.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a tangible change of the guard. Not saying the old guard was bad, but it's time for a new wave, and we can feel it. And so we were talking about, how there's 1 degree of separation here. When you go to events around here, whether it's a GCP event or a John Carroll event or a North Coast Ventures event or whoever it is, it's always a group of 250 people.
Yep.
We all see each other all the time. It's great because we all know each other, and it's easier to cut through the barriers of getting stuff done. But I'd like to see that expand. And I think naturally an institution of higher education is designed to make that expansion, which is why I'm opening up my campus to the community. Come have your event at John Carroll. Come, I'll charge you at cost or not charge you at all. I'll sponsor you because I think it's important to have higher education as a major player within a successful ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of moving the needle. I like your framing actually of like success is job placement. I think one of the kind of interesting things about higher ed recently is like there's been sort of this like credibility crisis. Like what is the
for
purpose?
Good reason, by the way.
What is the purpose of higher ed? Why have costs gone up so much? And it's not entirely obvious. Like what?
No, I think we earned all that criticism. I really do. And so what I'm saying might seem sacrilegious to some of my colleagues, but I don't really care. The bottom line is that we need to be producing talent into the ecosystem. And so, I just had a debate with one of my colleagues because I'm implementing a tech core into the business school.
Yeah.
I think it's irresponsible to let people graduate from business school without understanding technology. I'm not looking for them to be coders or developers or anything, but how can an accounting major graduate without understanding blockchain, or a finance major graduate without having an idea about applications of fintech, and so on and so on. And so I'm implementing that into the curriculum of the business school. Now, we're a liberal arts institution. I have nothing against liberal arts. My undergraduate degree is in English. I think it's fundamental to the identity of a young person.
Yeah.
However, I cannot imagine how a young person can go into the marketplace without a fundamental understanding and proficiency of technology. And so I'm building that as something that eventually I'll require. And so I had a semi-debate with one of my colleagues where I said, it's important for university and college students to gain tech proficiency before they graduate. And the response was, well, I don't see why an English student needs to know about AI. And a classic turn of events ChatGPT comes out, right?
Yep.
And so the reason, since I've heard about ChatGPT, the reason that an English major should know about AI is that AI is eating its lunch.
Oh, yeah. I won't fully out my brother, who's a senior in college still, but when he was back with me over Thanksgiving, I was like, Corey, you got to check out ChatGPT. Across computer science, his law, and his business courses, it did all of his homework.
Of course. And so, there was a Harvard Business Review article that was published by 3 really well-known professors about ChatGPT. And at the very end, the note said, by the way, we submitted our draft of this paper to ChatGPT and told it to make it more interesting, and it did. And so ChatGPT has a Harvard Business Review piece under its name.
Yep.
But the point is, anything that AI can do, it will. There was this guy I just read about yesterday that published a children's book. ChatGPT wrote it. Some other AI illustrated it. The guy never wrote a sentence in his life, and he's a published author, right? And so that's how quick things are changing. And if you don't have an appreciation for technology, and again, nothing against philosophy degrees or all that stuff, even though, you got to have a plan on how you're going to live. But nothing against it as a foundation of the spiritual essence of a person. I really am for it. But if you ignore technology, or if you don't teach it like most of the universities don't, you are
doing a disservice,
an incredible disservice. You are neglecting your responsibilities. And so back to what you were saying, costs of attendance and all the other stuff have risen.
Yeah.
ROI, not so much. And so I think the costs that are rising are acceptable if ROI increases, right? I can't get into every single reason for the cost increases, other than supply and demand is one thing. And I'm like I said, I'm a capitalist.
Yeah.
You want to pay me $100,000 for your degree? Thanks. I'll write you a receipt. And so having said that, I can't sustain it if I don't provide solid ROI. I think our sector, our industry, is justifiably criticized.
Yeah.
And so we need to provide a lot more applicable education, with the understanding that if you cannot sustain a life and a career with what you learned at school, you should have second thoughts.
Yeah. How far from consensus contrarian do you feel your position is? Because in some ways, my sense as an outsider, not involved really in academia, is I don't know that universities have really grasped what might be like existential risk for some of them who've been kind of complacent, relying on their brand.
I think I'm a pariah. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
You could probably tell I don't care. But here's the issue. We cannot continue to do what we're doing because competition will eat us alive.
Right.
And it's already happening.
Yeah.
And so, the reality is proving me right. And I always give the example of the tech companies, but eventually it'll be everybody. And every company is a tech company. But what I mean is by the traditional, Facebook, Google, Intel, Amazon, they are telling young people, forget about college, come here, we'll train you, and we'll give you a job. They're doing that precisely because of what I was saying. It's because I'm not preparing them to work at Google. Google doesn't want to be in the higher ed industry. It has no choice. And so they're basically looking around the marketplace and going, oh my God, these people don't know anything that I need them to know.
Yeah.
And so it's our responsibility to make sure that we're in tune with the employer market, or the employer market is going to skip right over us. And so, you're seeing college dropouts, like Zuckerberg and others saying skip college. Of course, there's one Zuckerberg, right? And in Cleveland, there aren't any Zuckerbergs. So you go to college here, your life is going to be better. There's no question. The stats are very clear. Your lifelong income is about $1 million more than if you wouldn't.
Yep.
I mean, it's pretty clear between the coasts that you should go to college. And so, but it's eroding. It's all self-inflicted. And so you need more folks insisting on tangible results, ROI, and lifelong learning, which is something that we're in the 4-year come in, get your degree, and leave model. That is not a good place to be.
Really interesting. Yeah. We'll kind of bookend it a little bit here, but maybe just kind of a greenfield question. Reflecting on your time as an entrepreneur, as helping people into the entrepreneurial ecosystem, investing in founders. parting wisdom, about that, and then we'll bring it to our closing question.
Yeah, I don't know about wisdom, but I can give a parting statement. I think it's important to focus on innovation as a driving force, and so there's a lot of people who would say follow your dream and all the other stuff. Great, innovation is its own motivation. Without it, you lose competitive position. And so if there's anything to learn from history, and I'm a history buff, a business history, if you can call it, and like I said, I'm looking at grave mistakes and failures. It's usually around the enterprise ceasing to innovate. And so be a deliberate innovator. And the way to do that is to be completely open to criticism, which is insanely difficult because there's an ego situation. All of us who have gotten to some sort of position in our careers have done so because we have some degree of ego. And the more success, the ego usually tends to inflate, not deflate. And so being aware of that, having a sense of humor, and not taking yourself too seriously will allow you to be more innovative. There's nothing worse than saying, I've achieved everything I need to achieve. This is how it's going to be. No, it's not. There's somebody trying to innovate right now. Might as well be you.
Yeah. Awesome. Last, the traditional closing question.
Yeah.
Which is, we'll bring it back to Cleveland. Not for your favorite thing in Cleveland, but for something that other folks may not know about. A hidden gem.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I don't know how many hidden gems there are anymore because Cleveland's now become fashionable, right? So when we moved here, we came here from Massachusetts in 2006. And I remember people asking me, Cleveland, are you insane? And then the other question was, which side? I said, there's sides? I didn't know there were sides to Cleveland. And so one of the things that we ended up on the east side, and one of the things that we discovered that was a hidden gem for us, and we still find ourselves going back to, is Chagrin Falls all year round. First of all, it reminds us a little bit of New England, where we came from.
It does,
but it also is within an incredibly short driving distance. It's like we're in a different universe, and so it's not so much a hidden gem anymore, but it's still a gem.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you
very much for coming on, for sharing your story, your thoughts, opinions.
I enjoyed it. Thank
really
you very
enjoyed
much.
it as well. Yeah.
Thanks.
If people had anything they wanted to follow up with you about, what would be the best way?
The best way is to connect to me on LinkedIn. Just punch in my first and last name, or my handle is Higher Ed OKR. OKR standing for Objectives and Known Results, which is Intel's way of doing strategy. We could have another episode just about that.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with The Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.